"We can't let a poor designer ruin our family's reputation today, dear." Those were the exact words my mother whispered as the security staff at my sister's luxury wedding venue blocked me at the entrance. After 6 months of hand-stitching my sister's custom, one-of-a-kind wedding gown for free, spending thousands out of my own pocket for imported silk, my family decided I was good enough to be their unpaid laborer, but not good enough to sit at their table. They thought humiliating me in front of 200 wealthy guests would put me in my place. But they forgot one crucial detail. I didn't just make the dress. I retained full commercial ownership of the design. Right there in the lobby, I smiled, reached into my clutch, handed my mother an itemized, rush order invoice for $24,000, and walked away. 3 days later, her phone call came. "Follow my story to the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Maya. I'm 27 years old, running an independent dress design studio that I built from scratch with nothing more than raw grit, a second-hand sewing machine, and endless late nights. My younger sister, Chloe, has always been the golden child of our family. In the eyes of our status-obsessed mother, Evelyn, Chloe could do no wrong. While every achievement of mine was met with an indifferent nod, Chloe's slightest effort was celebrated like a royal coronation. So when Chloe announced her engagement to the son of an elite, high-society family, Evelyn's vanity hit an all-time high. The wedding planning immediately turned into a spectacle of wealth and prestige. 3 weeks after the announcement, Chloe came to my studio, tears in her eyes. She begged me to design her dream bridal gown from scratch, calling it a once-in-a-lifetime, sisterly bonding experience, and promising it would bring massive exposure to my brand. I loved my sister. So despite the mountain of work, I agreed. I offered my labor completely free as a wedding gift. The only agreement was that they would cover the expensive imported materials out of my upfront savings. I poured my heart into that design, believing this gesture would finally make my mother and sister see me as a real part of the family. Over the next 6 months, my small studio became a battleground of sheer exhaustion. I poured every spare hour into Chloe's gown, ordering hand-woven silk directly from Italy and spending weeks hand-stitching intricate beaded lace onto the bodice. Every modification Chloe demanded was more complex than the last, yet neither she nor my mother ever offered a word of thanks. Instead, the demands only grew louder. Whenever I brought up the cost of the imported fabrics that I was funding out of my own savings, Evelyn would dismissively wave her hand, claiming we would settle up after the big day. I brushed off the mounting stress, reassuring myself that the sacrifice would be worth it when I saw my sister walk down the aisle in my creation. Then, subtle cracks began to appear. I noticed I was mysteriously excluded from the family's group chats about the venue tastings and bridal showers. When I asked why I hadn't been invited to the rehearsal dinner, Evelyn gave a smooth, rehearsed excuse, claiming I was far too busy perfecting the dress to be bothered with trivial events. I swallowed the rising lump in my throat and kept sewing. 2 days before the wedding, I delivered the completed gown. It was a masterpiece, flawless, regal, and breathtaking. Chloe tried it on, turning in front of the mirror like royalty, barely acknowledging the dark circles under my eyes or the raw calluses on my fingers. As I adjusted the train one last time, Evelyn stood in the doorway, eyeing my simple jeans and worn blazer. She made a sharp, backhanded comment about my modest lifestyle, contrasting it with the elite high-society family Chloe was marrying into. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but I forced a polite smile. I still had no idea just how far they were willing to go. On the morning of the wedding, I put on my finest navy formal dress, fixed my hair, and drove to the exclusive botanical estate where the ceremony was being held. After months of grueling work, I was eager to finally sit back, celebrate my sister, and watch her walk down the aisle in the gown I'd built stitch by stitch. When I reached the grand glass entrance of the venue, 2 tall security guards immediately stepped into my path. I gave them my name, expecting them to hand me a program and direct me toward the family seating. Instead, one of them checked his digital tablet, frowned, and told me firmly that my name wasn't listed on the master guest list. Before I could clear up what I assumed was a simple clerical error, the heavy oak doors opened. My mother stepped out into the foyer, looking magnificent in her emerald gown. But the moment her eyes met mine, there was no warmth, only a cold, calculated stare. She pulled me toward a quiet corner of the lobby and lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. She explained that space was extremely limited and that the groom's family represented the peak of high society. She said having a struggling trades worker sitting at the front tables would look out of place and embarrass them in front of the elite guests. "We can't let a poor designer ruin our family's reputation today, dear," she whispered without a trace of remorse. She suggested I wait in the staff lounge until the reception ended, or simply drive home quietly. Standing in that grand foyer, listening to my own mother banish me like hired help, the hurt evaporated, replaced by absolute, crystal-clear focus. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, a wave of icy calm washed over me. For months, they had treated me like unpaid help, assuming my affection as a daughter and sister meant I would tolerate endless disrespect. They forgot that beneath my quiet nature, I was a businesswoman. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. I had prepared it 2 nights ago, just in case my gut feeling proved right. Inside was an official itemized commercial invoice for my studio. I didn't charge them family rates. I charged full commercial value. $3,000 for high-grade imported Italian silk and hand-beaded lace, $12,000 for 600 hours of custom hand-stitching and rush revisions, and a $9,000 rush delivery and commercial licensing fee. The total came to exactly $24,000. I looked my mother dead in the eye, placed the envelope firmly into her manicured hands, and leaned in close. "Since I'm just a poor trades worker and not family today, standard vendor terms apply," I said, my voice steady and deadly calm. "That invoice is due in full within 72 hours. Since I retain full intellectual property rights to the design until payment clears, failing to settle it will result in an immediate copyright infringement lawsuit against Chloe and her new high society in-laws." Evelyn's face drained of color as her mouth opened in silent shock. She tried to stammer out a reply, but I turned on my heel before she could speak a single word. I pushed open the heavy glass doors, walked out into the crisp afternoon air, and got into my car. Behind those doors, my sister was preparing to walk down the aisle in a gown that had technically not been paid for, while my mother stood alone in the foyer, holding a ticking legal clock. I drove away with my head held high, leaving their gilded facade behind. For the next 3 days, I completely muted my phone, checked into a quiet coastal hotel, and focused on myself. I took long walks on the beach, enjoyed expensive meals, and let the quiet surroundings wash away months of built-up exhaustion. When the 72-hour deadline finally arrived on Tuesday morning, I took my phone off silent mode. The screen instantly lit up with a barrage of notifications, 98 missed calls, dozens of frantic voicemails, and endless text threads from my mother and Chloe. Their messages had shifted from initial anger and guilt-tripping to pure, unadulterated panic. My lawyer had already served Evelyn with a formal demand letter that morning, warning her that non-payment would lead to an immediate public lawsuit, naming Chloe's elite new in-laws as co-defendants for displaying unauthorized commercial property. At noon, my mother finally called from a private number. When I answered, her voice was stripped of all its usual arrogance. She tried one last time to call me ungrateful, but I simply replied, "You have 2 hours before my attorney files the paperwork with the court." Before the deadline expired, my phone chimed with a bank alert. The full $24,000 had been wired into my account, accompanied by a brief, bitter text from Evelyn telling me never to speak to them again. I used that money to move into a larger studio space in the city and purchase top-of-the-line equipment. Today, my business is thriving, booked out 6 months in advance by clients who actually respect my craft and pay for my time. I lost a toxic family that day, but I gained something far more valuable: my dignity, my independence, and absolute control over my own worth.